With just 8 legislative days scheduled before a possible government shutdown, House Republicans are moving toward a continuing resolution to extend current funding another month, while also enhancing spending for border security. With a House vote on this continuing resolution, or CR, as it's known on the Hill, possibly coming as early as Thursday, many conservative members of the House consider this spending plan as a mere continuation of the Biden administration's budget and policies, and are saying they cannot support such a measure. Joining me now to discuss this and more is Congressman Bob Good. He serves on the House Budget Committee and the House Committee on Education and Workforce. He represents the 5th Congressional District of Virginia. He's also a member of the House Freedom Caucus. Congressman Good, welcome back to the program. Great to see you.
Hey, Tony, great to be with you. Thanks for having me once again, my friend.
So let's talk about this. This is a unique opportunity, and I've seen this so many times over the 20 years, and I was talking with a couple of your colleagues this morning about this, that there's this fear of the pain that's going to be required to bring our spending into alignment with the principles of responsible government. Where do we stand in these negotiations, and are we likely to see changes?
I would like to frame the issue, Tony, by reminding our viewers that we are on track for a $2.2 trillion deficit this year, the largest non-COVID deficit in the history of the country. We're going to, borrow some $6,000 per, a little more than $6,000 per American citizen, not household, not taxpayer, but citizen. We're going to spend about $20,000 per citizen. Again, borrow $6,000 of that, and only $3,000 of that 20 will be to defend the country from a national security standpoint. In addition, we are knocking on the door of $33 trillion national debt, right at $100,000 per 330 million Americans. And all of this is happening, Tony, with a Republican majority. We ran last November on fiscal responsibility. We ran on cutting spending. The speaker committed to that effect back in January in order to become speaker. We committed to going back to pre-COVID levels for non-defense discretionary spending. Virtually all Republicans voted to that effect in April. And quite simply, the speaker has failed to lead us. He's failed to cast a vision. He's failed to strongly persuade Republicans to follow him in doing what we committed to do. And we find ourselves here on September 18 with only having passed one of our 12 appropriations bills. Quite simply, we should pass those bills, send them to the Senate, and then Schumer can decide if he wants a Schumer shutdown again, and it's up to him whether or not he does that. We can do that close to September 30 or early into October with minimal impact on the American people, virtually no impact, quite frankly. We did it a week or two into October. That's where we should be, and that's what we should do.
So, Congressman, as you mentioned, one of the 12 appropriations bills in the House has moved forward, none in the Senate. Is there time to get that done in the next week?
It'll be challenging with essentially 2 weeks left this week and next week, 10 legislative days certainly to do that. But again, it's not some dramatic thing that happens on October 1 at the start of the new fiscal year. 85% of government operations continue. Only about 15% are placed on pause. As you know, all federal workers are either paid or made whole. Essential operations continue. Most Americans won't even notice there's a shutdown unless they're watching the news reports and listening to the media and hearing the predictions of catastrophe. However, again, we could get this done a week or two into October. It takes leadership from the speaker, and it takes heretofore undemonstrated resolve on his part to cut our spending, to lead our conference, to keep the commitments from January, to do what we said we would do in April. And frankly, Tony, what he said he would do after he caught so much criticism for the Failed Responsibility Act, the basically unconditional debt ceiling increase in May, when he said, well, that's the ceiling, not the floor. We're going to really use the appropriations process to cut our spending. Right. And so far, he has failed to lead us to do that.
Yeah, I recall that very clearly, that the appropriations process was where the cuts were going to take place, but we've not seen the appropriations moving forward. Now, the government shutdown, I mean, that's more of the kind of COVID scare tactics. That, the sky is falling, it's going to be disastrous. We've been through those before, and the world still rotates.
Yes, we're only here because of a failure on the speaker's part to lead. Frankly, he could command those moderate members who said only he could be our speaker. He's the only one they could support. They followed him and him alone, and he could be telling them, this is what I need to stay on as speaker, quite frankly, to keep our commitments to the American people. And Tony, we're only going to pre-COVID non-defense discretionary levels is only a $115 billion cut when we're running a monthly deficit of more than $150 billion. So quite frankly, what we're calling for is the compromise that we voted for in April, when many of us would like to cut our spending much more, and frankly, the debt and the national debt demand that we cut it much more. And Tony, I've only had one constituent tell me they're concerned about a government shutdown, where I've had hundreds over the last few weeks beg me not to be afraid of a shutdown, to insist that we cut our spending, not to agree to a continuing resolution, but to demand that we pass our bills, implement our conservative priorities, and cut our spending.
All right, Congressman Good, let's talk about an agreement in principle that was reached by the House Freedom Caucus, members of the House Freedom Caucus, and the Main Street Caucus, which would essentially create a CR for about 30 days. It would cut discretionary spending by 8%, continuing funding for education, would attach H.R. 2, the border bill that the Republicans passed, to the funding bill. It would also attach the appropriations bill that did pass regarding the Department of Defense. Is this a non-starter?
Well, I think so. And I appreciate my colleagues who've worked this effect. But to clarify, it wasn't an agreement by the Freedom Caucus. What you had was three representatives, or I should say three members of the Freedom Caucus on their own, not represent the Freedom Caucus, three members on their own, great members who I respect greatly, close friends of mine. But those three members chose to meet with three members of the Main Street Caucus to see if they could kind of get on the same page, the six of them, and then bring back to the conference at large some kind of a proposal. They've done that. But Tony, what it does is it cuts only the non-national security or non-defense portion of the discretionary spending. So about 40% of that is what it cuts, and it cuts by 8% for one 30-day period. I don't even know how you implement that for 30 days or how it has a chance to take effect even for 30 days. But you're really talking about 3% of discretionary funding because it only applies to 40% of discretionary funding, and it's 8% cut of that. So if you annualize that, that's about a 3% annualized is about 2.5% on our 0.25% funding cut for 30 days to the discretionary funding. And, you know, they're even acknowledging they don't think the Senate would pass it, and certainly would not with the border security portion of it. And what I think efforts are being made, and I have to assume the best of intentions, of course, from my colleagues who I respect, but to relieve the pressure. But I don't think we ought to relieve the pressure on Speaker McCarthy. I think he ought to do what he committed to do. It's within his power to lead us. And frankly, that's what he needs to do. And we need to pass our spending bills.
So do you expect a vote on the House floor this week on this proposed CR?
I suspect we will not have a vote on it because I don't think there's sufficient number of votes for it to pass. So I don't think that it'll be brought to the floor.
So is there any movement then to start moving these appropriation bills to the floor, seeing that we do not have a short-term funding measure that looks like it'll be successful?
Well, you're going to have mounting pressure to do so, and the House can take the high ground. Again, I know I keep repeating it, Tony, but it is that simple. It's like running a marathon. It's not complicated. Run that direction for 26 miles and don't stop. It's not easy, but it's not complicated. We need to pass our spending bills. The Speaker can lead us. We know with a narrow majority, there's many of us who can stop things from happening or slow things down. But if you want to get something done, to command the majority to do it, to lead the majority to do it, to carry the voice of the conference, it takes the Speaker's office. And the Speaker's office needs to cast the vision, get behind the vision, lead the membership in doing that. The conservative votes are there. The American people are there to cut our spending back to pre-COVID levels, as we committed to do for non-defense discretionary spending. The Speaker needs to lead the moderates and the independents, the moderates among our caucus, our Republican conference. And then, frankly, it goes to the Senate for negotiation. Right. And then what comes back, maybe it's not something that I can vote for with a compromise with a Democrat Senate, but the moderates would have a chance to vote for it when it came back from the Senate.
All right. Bob Good, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining me, my friend.
Thank you, Tony. Great to be with you.